Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about. Okay, so let's continue our discussion of Henrik Ibsen's A Dollhouse. And we're on to Act 3 now. So we've seen Nora sort of reach her breaking point. She dances the tarantella and sort of reveals some of her inner conflict in a sort of outward expression. Act 3 sort of brings everything out in the open. So all the secrets and deceptions, the web of lies, all sort of come out into the open, and then we see sort of characters for who they truly are. So that's one of the things that we'll talk about in Act 3 is how the reality of certain characters comes to the surface. So certain characters have the appearance of one thing, but the reality is different. So we'll talk about how our perceptions of individual characters changes over the course of Act 3. And I also, of course, want to discuss Nora's kind of evolution. She kind of goes through a very significant transformation from who she begins as, this kind of feather-brained housewife, and then becoming a more autonomous, independent woman who wants to gain a sense of the world and gain experience and learn, educate herself, and experience the world for herself and gain knowledge and understanding and grow as a person. So we're going to talk about those things in our final discussion of Act 3. So for each of the characters, Helmer, Nora, Krogstad, and Christine, or Mrs. Lind, whatever you want to call her, our perception of them changes over the course of Act 3 when certain aspects of their personality or they sort of change our perception of how we see them initially. So each character kind of acts differently than how we first perceive them. So if you think about a character like Krogstad, at the beginning of the play, he was definitely perceived by the reader as a villain. He's the antagonist. He's causing all the problems, the conflicts in Nora and Helmer's happy marriage. So he comes across as very much a villain. Christine, or Mrs. Lind, she seems to be very, hard luck, very sad, very depressed, and she is very much about supporting Nora in whatever she needs her to do, keeping the secret from Helmer or getting Krogstad off her back. So she seems to be very motivated to help Nora, but that sort of shifts in Act 3. Helmer comes across as a very moral person, very, sees himself as very righteous and moral, and a very loving husband, you might argue, against that, but he comes across as very affectionate and loving towards his wife. And then Nora, our surface impression of her is probably just that she was a very kind of feather-brained housewife. She didn't have any kind of self-control when it came to spending, and she just was a very almost like childlike, naive, submissive wife to Helmer. So those are our initial kind of appearances of these characters, or their surface appearance. But as Act 3 it continues, or as we see these characters grow and change, Act 3 really shows how the reality, there's more going on than just the surface, right? So the inner aspect of each of these characters is portrayed. So there's more going on than just the surface reality. So if we look at what each character sort of transforms into, or what they have evolved or grown or shown us by the end of the play, Krogstad goes from being a very evil, kind of manipulative, blackmailing antagonist or villain to being a more sympathetic character. He's a widow, he's got children to support, he's trying to redeem his name within society, and he's really just down on his luck and has done whatever he could to survive and support his family. So he might be turning to blackmail, but it's sort of his desperation. Um, so we kind of have a little bit more sympathy towards his character by the end of the play. Christine, or Mrs. Lind, also kind of shifts gears a little bit. So she goes from being very supportive and saving Nora, hiding information from Helmer, trying to get the letter back from Krogstad, and she switches gears and then decides that it's best for Nora and Helmer if this letter is actually out in the open, that these two, this marriage, needs to have this revelation, this awakening, this epiphany has to occur so they for them to both grow and recognize the truth about each other. So she goes from saving Nora to really saving Krogstad, and they are reunited. And we'll talk a little bit more about their kind of relationship and the complexities of that. So she also goes from being alone to having somebody to love and support by the end. Nora comes across, again, like we said, a very feather-brained kind of housewife, but she transforms over that final act into a very independent thinker, a woman who wants to experience the world for herself, and she's going to do anything that she has to do in order to grow as a person. So she becomes a lot more independent, a lot, I guess you could say, stronger, more autonomous or independent from her husband, and more brave, really, in her choice that she makes at the end. And then Helmer, who was first perceived as a very loving husband and a very morally righteous man, he turns out to be more selfish and shallow than we first thought him to be. And his so-called love for his wife seems to be more superficial and more selfish than anything. So their marriage kind of falls apart in Act 3 as they see each other almost for the first time and they don't like what they see. So it's kind of this moment of epiphany, a big awakening for Nora, especially as she sees Helmer for who he is and then chooses a different path in life. Okay, so let's start with the relationship between Christine, Mrs. Lind, and Krogstad. Both of these individuals have had very tough times of it. Both are widows. Both have had to struggle to support themselves. So it turns out that these two have known each other previously, and they're not enemies after the same job. They're actually former lovers who had a relationship. And it turns out that Christine, Mrs. Lind, broke up with Krogstad when she was offered or proposed to by a different man. And her choice came down to the fact that she was in the position to have to support her ailing mother and her two younger brothers. So she married this other man who she didn't love, but he seemed, at least on the surface, to be wealthy or well-to-do and could take care of her. But as we know, that didn't work either because his business was failing, and then he later died and left her a widow with nothing. So it didn't work out very well. So she approaches Krogstad and tells us that she wants to join forces with him, that together they can be stronger and support each other. Both their lives are in, complete disarray or a wreck, but together they could be each other's support and love one another. So she offers Krogstad to be there for him. She says, I need someone to mother and your children need a mother. We two need each other. We can face anything together. So we have a kind of reuniting of these two former lovers and joining together. So it's sort of a happy ending for these two, Krogstad and Christine, in that we know that they now have more support in their lives. And they both know each other flaws and all, which seems to make this relationship a kind of contrast to Nora and Helmer's. So both of these individuals know each other's pasts. They've struggled and survived on their own for a very long time before they get together, and they know everything about each other. So it seems as if they're two equals meeting or reuniting, and then their marriage will be one of sort of equal parts, a real kind of marriage. So they're kind of a contrast to the other couple in the play, Nora and her husband, who don't really know each other at all. Christine also kind of surprises us by her actions. So Krogstad agrees that he would take back the letter and everything could go back to normal, but she insists that he actually go through with delivering this letter, or letting them open the letter that he's put in their mailbox. So she decides that the unhappy secret must come out. Those two must have the whole thing out between them. All this secrecy and deception just can't go on. So she is sort of the instigator for this huge revelation that's going to come between Nora and her husband. Krogstad also kind of surprises us as, you know, he's not as villainous as we first perceived him to be. He's not this evil guy. After all, he seems more desperate than anything. He calls himself a broken man, clinging to the wreck of his life. So he's in a bad position. Basically, he was widowed and he has children to support. He's worked really hard in the past year to sort of clear his name and to work in a real job at the bank, and, you know, try to put his past behind him. But, you know, with Helmer firing him, he has this sort of desperation that leads him to blackmail Nora, and then to sort of blackmail Helmer eventually. But it seems as if he's had a kind of turnaround with Mrs. Lind. The reunion of their love really causes him to sort of want to rescue Nora and not hold her responsible or hold her accountable for her forgery or the money. So he kind of becomes, you know, he instigates another type of revelation and he kind of rescues them as well. So he has two letters that he'll send to. The first letter he's already put in the mailbox to Helmer. The second one he's going to write following his reunion with Christine. One is going to deliver the bad news, one's going to deliver good news, but it's going to be an eye-opening revelation in the letters, and it's going to cause a lot of conflict between Nora and her husband.